Early morning in the heart of a modern metropolis, where the past and future intertwine in every brick of an ancient building, filled the air with a special energy. Through the light fog that blurred the outlines of the streets, the first rays of sunlight broke through, creating long, almost mystical shadows. Ryan Chen, a martial arts champion with international titles, stood on the terrace of his gym, feeling that every morning was an opportunity for him to change his destiny. His gaze was focused, and his eyes shone with determination, tempered by years of training and numerous victories. From an early age, Ryan knew that achieving perfection required not only training the body, but also tempering the spirit. He remembered the sleepless nights spent in training halls, where, to the sounds of heavy blows on punching bags and the echo of his own breath, he sought answers to questions about strength, honor, and dignity. Today, in the silence of dawn, his thoughts drifted back to moments when traditional values seemed outdated to him, and ceremonial rituals appeared as mere empty displays, hiding true mastery. His inner voice quietly reminded him, true strength is born where courage challenges conventions. These reflections filled him with confident pride, but also a slight shadow of doubt, for every movement, every victory requires sacrifices. Against the backdrop of the ancient cityscape, where modern skyscrapers neighbor majestic buildings of past eras, Ryan felt like a bridge between two worlds. In his soul, the sight of ceremonial displays, where static figures of guards, like living monuments of discipline, embodied the past, seemed distant and alien. He recalled how, during numerous tournaments, his modern, dynamic technique clashed with rigid rituals, evoking both contempt and a deep understanding that tradition could be not only a limitation, but also a source of strength. With each new morning, Ryan increasingly felt that his time had come. His training and victories, proof of individual power honed in countless battles, had long overshadowed the ceremonial rigidity he saw in the behavior of guards performing their ritual duties. He knew that soon the moment would come when he would have to challenge the established order itself. In this moment, as the city awoke and the fog gradually gave way to clarity, a premonition of an impending battle arose in his heart, a battle where tradition would clash with innovation and old dogmas would yield to true effectiveness. Inside the training hall, filled with the sounds of blows on punching bags and quiet whispers of instructions, Ryan repeated to himself, "Today is the day of change." His muscles, honed by years of relentless training, trembled with tension, ready for the decisive test. He looked at his Rolex watch, a gift from a sponsor, and remembered all those moments when his talent was questioned, when traditional methods seemed useless in real combat. Every moment was filled with significance. Now everything would change, and he would prove that modern strength could break old rules. Against the backdrop of a bright but slightly hazy dawn, as the city was just beginning to come to life, Ryan felt the air filled with the energy of change. His gaze, full of determination and a slight challenge, was directed toward the future, where his skill and spirit were to shine brighter than any ceremony. At that moment, he knew, today his destiny would be rewritten, and traditions, so sacred to some, would find new life in his hands. With this realization, filled with a mix of pride, excitement, and a bit of nervous anticipation, he took the first step towards the inevitable clash of worlds. Against the backdrop of an ancient building embodying centuries-old traditions and the grandeur of the past, Ryan Chen and his team gathered to demonstrate their martial arts skills. This building, with its massive columns and carved bas-reliefs, reminded of a glorious past when discipline and ceremony were the highest values. Today, however, it became an arena where two worlds would clash: the dynamic, swift spirit of modern martial arts and the static tradition embodied in the motionless figures of the guards. The crowd gathered. Tourists, locals, and military veterans slowly filled the space around the square. People spoke in whispers, exchanging opinions, and the air was filled with tension, foreshadowing something grand. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Everyone knew that today something would happen that would change the familiar perception of strength and discipline. Ryan, dressed in a stylish sports suit that accentuated his muscular build and confidence, moved among his team, conversing with his comrades like a commander on the battlefield. In his eyes, determination was evident, And in his voice, there was a firmness that made everyone believe in the inevitable transformation of what was happening. Within his consciousness, thoughts swirled. How many times have I seen this ceremonial rigidity devalue true mastery? Today I will show that tradition is not absolute, but merely a ritual that gives way to real combat experience. Every word and movement of his was filled with a challenge to conventions, accumulated over the years and hiding behind them only formality. He believed that the immobility of the guards was a symbol of the past that no longer had a place in a world where speed, adaptability, and individual mastery were the keys to victory. On a small, improvised training field organized right on the square, Ryan's team practiced combat techniques and tactical movements. Instructors accurately repeated practice combinations, and each punch and block was perceived as a step towards overcoming traditional barriers. Ryan watched his comrades with pride and a hint of mockery, remembering last year's tournament where his technique led to a lightning-fast victory. But today he knew, challenging tradition was not just a sporting competition, it was a demonstration of a new era. Each member of the team was ready for the moment when it would be necessary to challenge old norms. They felt the air filled with the energy of change, energy capable of destroying even the most unyielding conventions. The gazes of the fighters were directed at Ryan, who magnetically attracted their attention, embodying the idea that strength begins with individual mastery and should not be subordinate to traditional rituals. The gathered crowd watched as Ryan looked with contempt at the motionless guard who embodied the old system. His thoughts were full of confidence. Today I will show that true mastery is not measured by statics. Every punch, every reaction is an expression of strength and life. He slowly approached the group where the guard, dressed in traditional uniform, stood with an expression of calm dignity. With each step, his inner world filled with determination, and his voice, quiet but confident, cut through the air as he addressed his team. Get ready, today tradition will face reality. These words spread across the square, stirring a storm of emotions in the crowd, from approval to obvious doubt about what might happen. The crowd held their breath. Each person on the square felt the growing tension, as if the city itself was preparing to witness a historic event. Ryan watched the guard's immobility with a hint of mockery, his gaze cold and precise, as if he already foresaw the outcome of this confrontation. At that moment, it seemed that time slowed down, and every breath, every movement was filled with significance. Finally, Ryan took a decisive step towards the conventions of the past. His words, full of challenge and determination, echoed across the square. It's time to show that tradition cannot defeat true strength and adaptability. This call became the starting point, the moment when old rituals and modern methods clashed face to face. The gazes of those present mixed with surprise and admiration, and the crowd began to prepare for what would soon become not just a demonstration of martial arts, but a real confrontation capable of changing perceptions of strength, discipline, and traditions. The crowd gathered on the lively square held their breath as they watched Ryan Chen slowly approach the guard standing motionless, like a statue in his traditional uniform. His eyes burned with confidence, and at that moment, time seemed to slow down. Every step of his was filled with determination and hidden pain, memories of numerous training sessions where he tried to prove that true strength is not defined by rigid rituals, but born from dynamics, speed, and the ability to adapt to real conditions. His inner monologue resonated with his pounding heart. I'm tired of these rituals. Today I will prove that true mastery is not a pose for a photo, but the ability to breathe, move, live. Every word of his was a challenge to the past, a cry of the soul that wanted to break free from the shackles of outdated traditions. Amid the tense gazes of the public, Ryan suddenly began to perform a series of lightning-fast movements. He had honed each strike to perfection, as if he believed that every movement of his was not just a technique, but a message to all who still believed in the power of static ceremonies. With incredible speed, he made a decisive lunge, his leg powerfully and accurately directed toward the face of the guard, William Harrington. The moment when Ryan's foot made contact with Harrington was so vivid that it seemed as if the entire square was illuminated by a blinding light. The guard's fur hat flew into the air, describing a dramatic arc, and in Ryan's eyes flashed a joy of victory mixed with the bitterness of realization. He understood that this strike was symbolic, and its goal was not so much to cause harm as to show that tradition, like a static stone, could be destroyed by the power of true mastery. At the moment when the hat soared into the sky, the crowd erupted in whispers and surprised exclamations. Ryan, realizing the scale of what was happening, felt a mix of emotions, euphoria from the instant victory, and a sudden realization that he had crossed the line between demonstrating strength and challenging established norms. His inner voice sounded sharp and bitter. What if I was wrong? What if this was not just a show, but a mistake that cannot be corrected? On Harrington's face, despite the visible signs of the blow, a slight bruise and a drop of blood on his temple, there was an amazing calmness and professional composure. His gaze met Ryan's, and in that brief encounter, there was a silent, almost telepathic communication. One spoke of discipline and tradition, the other of freedom and the power of change. In the guard's eyes, there was a spark that could be taken for a sign of respect, but also a warning. True mastery requires not only strength, but also wisdom. After the strike, Ryan froze for a moment, as if trying to digest what had happened. His face, covered in sweat and small beads of sweat, expressed both triumph and bewilderment. At that moment, his thoughts revolved around questions. Am I really ready to destroy conventions? Can I accept the consequences of my actions? Every second seemed like an eternity, and every emotion was a naked truth about the fact that his path would never be easy. On the one hand, his body and mind screamed of victory, since he had proven that statics are not a sign of strength. On the other hand, uncertainty grew within him, caused by the realization that by destroying tradition, he was losing part of his own identity, nurtured over the years in an environment of strict rituals and expectations. The crowd around began to react to what was happening in different ways. Some spectators, stunned by the drama of the moment, applauded and chanted in support of Ryan, while others, especially representatives of the older generation, expressed bewilderment and even indignation. In the voices of the public, one could hear a mix of admiration and sorrow, as if they were witnessing not just a martial arts duel, but a clash of two worlds, a world where technique and speed rule, and a world where tradition and discipline remain sacred. Several veterans sitting in the back rows exchanged glances filled with respect and concern. Their experience, steeped in years of service and trials, told them that a real fight is not always measured by a blow. It is born in the heart, in mental endurance, and the ability to face the challenges of fate. When the noise of the crowd began to gradually subside, and the guard's hat descended onto the cobblestones of the square, there was a short, almost sacred silence. Ryan stood still, his breathing rapid, and his thoughts like a fire burning inside. He understood that this strike had become a turning point not only for him, but for all who witnessed this confrontation. This culmination became the beginning of deep changes, changes that promised to break old canons and provide an opportunity to rethink what it means to be strong and disciplined in the modern world. For Ryan, this moment became painful but necessary, a lesson that, despite all its harshness, awakened in him the desire to seek truth beyond conventional notions of tradition. After Ryan's lightning-fast strike marked the clash of two worlds, the square was plunged into oppressive silence. The echo of what had happened still hung in the air, like invisible dust settling on the hearts of everyone present. The crowd, initially stunned and motionless, began to slowly awaken from a state of shock. At first there were quiet whispers, then sharp exclamations mixed with uncertain glances. It seemed to everyone that what had happened would forever change the familiar order, and the world would never be the same again. People standing on the square reacted differently. Some, young and bold, applauded Ryan, seeing in his actions a symbol of modernity and freedom from outdated rituals. Others, especially representatives of the older generation, expressed obvious indignation and fear. The tradition that had bound them to the past for centuries had been violated, and now before them lay chaos. A group of military veterans exchanged glances with deep bewilderment, trying to comprehend how someone who had always been renowned for discipline could so recklessly violate the ceremony. These contrasting sentiments were reflected in every glance and every breath. Public opinion began to change, as if reality itself began to reevaluate its foundations. Ryan himself stood at the center of this whirlwind, but inside him, a real storm of emotions raged. His body still pulsed with adrenaline, and his mind was overwhelmed by conflicting feelings. On the one hand, he felt pride that he had proven that true mastery does not fit within the framework of static ceremonies. On the other hand, he was overcome by deep doubt and inner pain, for every action had its price. He pondered, do I really want to destroy what has been considered sacred for centuries? Can my strength justify the destruction of the foundations on which our society is built? These thoughts pierced him like sharp arrows, forcing him to reevaluate the meaning of his actions. Meanwhile, a discussion of what had happened began to grow around him. Among the crowd, one could hear how some shouted words of enthusiastic support, calling Ryan's actions a symbol of change, while others shouted with criticism and condemnation. How could he act so recklessly? These voices blended emotions of disappointment and hope, showing that everyone who witnessed the clash of tradition and modernity was forced to reevaluate their beliefs. It turned out that even those accustomed to stability began to wonder whether it was worth giving new ideas a chance, even if the price of change seemed too high. In the midst of emotional chaos, Ryan began to realize that his actions were not just a demonstration of strength, but the beginning of a deep inner revolution. His former confidence gradually gave way to the understanding that tradition, no matter how harsh its manifestation, had value for many people. He remembered the lessons learned in training, where discipline and respect for the opponent were fundamental principles. In his consciousness, a new realization was born. True mastery does not destroy, but transforms. He quietly said to himself, maybe I got too carried away proving my strength. It's time to learn to see the value in what many consider unshakable. This thought became a turning point, giving him the opportunity to look at the situation from a different angle. When the first waves of discussion began to subside, and the square gradually returned to its normal rhythm, there was a feeling that what had happened would become the beginning of change. Many of the spectators, struck by what they had seen, began to reevaluate their views on tradition and modernity. Ryan's inner world was filled with hope that the clash of two different worlds could lead to something new and better. He, feeling that his actions had awakened public consciousness, understood change is inevitable, and every clash of ideas is an opportunity for growth. Now, when tradition and innovation collided in one confrontation, all participants, from veterans to ordinary passersby, took the first step towards rethinking their future. This silence, filled with echoes of past conflicts and the sounds of new awakenings, promised that the world would never be the same again. After the square was once again filled with the sounds of discussions and whispers, which gradually turned into a lively discussion of what had happened. Not only the participants of the incident, but also representatives of the authorities took to the stage. Within a few hours after the clash between Ryan and Harrington, the situation took a completely different turn. The case turned from a public show into a legal battle capable of forever changing his life. Phones rang, and notifications from law enforcement agencies began to arrive one after another. Ryan received a notice to appear in court, and this moment marked the beginning of a chapter where his personal confrontation with tradition would have to face cold and impartial justice. In the courtroom, filled with anticipation and anxiety, Ryan sat surrounded by his lawyers. His face, still fresh from the adrenaline of the incident, was now hidden behind a mask of tense calm. Inside him, a real storm raged. On the one hand, he felt pride in the courage he had shown and the desire to prove that true strength lay in dynamics, not in static rituals. On the other hand, he realized that his actions had become the cause of legal proceedings, and this threatened consequences that he could not fully foresee. Every blow struck in that fateful moment now echoed in his consciousness, making him wonder, what if my struggle with tradition turns into a tragedy? Public opinion, like a constantly changing backdrop, intensified with each moment. The crowd in the courtroom was not homogeneous. Some applauded his courage, while others condemned and called his actions reckless. Ryan's inner voice constantly reminded him that even in court, true mastery is measured not only by the strength of a blow, but also by the ability to accept the consequences of one's actions. The court hearing took place in a strict, almost ceremonial atmosphere. The judge in a black robe listened to witness testimonies, examined documents, and closely watched the behavior of the parties. Lawyers on both sides presented evidence, screenshots, video recordings from the square, and witness statements. Each piece of evidence sounded like the blow of a hammer, confirming that the incident on the square was not just a spectacular performance, but an event that violated the foundations of public discipline. During the interrogation, one of the witnesses, a military veteran, with noticeable emotion in his voice, stated, "I have never seen tradition, which has served our people for so many years, mocked like this. This blow is not just a dispute between two people. It is a symbol of a break with the past." These words only intensified Ryan's inner conflict. His struggle with outdated norms was turning into a public discussion about values and strength, about what it means to be a true fighter in the modern world. When the judges delivered a preliminary decision, Ryan felt the pressure of responsibility weighing on him with renewed force. His inner world was torn between a sense of satisfaction from his courage and fear of the inevitable consequences. He realized that his actions had sparked a storm of public discussion and a re-evaluation of traditional notions of discipline. Every moment of the trial forced him to ask himself again and again, was it worth it? Throughout the entire process, he was accompanied by a shadow of doubt, but also the confidence that the truth revealed on the square could not be forgotten. His lawyers presented arguments proving that his actions, though shocking, were motivated by a desire for innovation and true combat mastery. In the courtroom, words were spoken that could change society's view of traditions, and each new argument became another brick in the foundation of a new paradigm. In the finale of the trial, when the verdict was announced, a brief silence fell over the courtroom. The court ruled that Ryan had not broken the law, as his actions were framed as a demonstration of martial arts skills, not a deliberate attack. This decision became a symbol of moral vindication, proof that a new vision of strength and discipline had the right to exist. At that moment, Ryan, with relief and a deep sense of responsibility, understood. His action had become the starting point for large-scale changes. The court's decision not only justified his actions, but also forced society to think about how tradition and modernity could coexist if they were ready to make way for mutual understanding and progress. The trial became for Ryan not just a legal test, but a real moral renaissance, which, despite all the harshness of the confrontation, opened for him the path to a new, deeper understanding of true strength. Strength based on the balance between individual mastery and collective discipline. When the noise of the trial subsided and the last echoes of applause gradually faded, Ryan Chen found himself alone on a deserted street, illuminated by the first rays of a new day. In this morning light, piercing the cool air of the metropolis, he felt his soul finally beginning to free itself from the weight of past conflicts. His inner voice, which for many months had been full of anger and doubt, suddenly found a new tone, calm, deep, and surprisingly sincere. Ryan realized that the victory in court was not just a legal success, but a turning point when his outlook on life began to change. At the very moment when Ryan thought his battle was over, he received a call from an unfamiliar number. On the other end of the line was a voice full of determination and sadness at the same time. It was Harrington, the guard with whom he had clashed on the square. Harrington confessed that his steadfastness and discipline were not the result of blind adherence to traditions, but of a hard life struggle, woven from pain, losses, and incredible determination. "You may have shown the world your strength, Ryan, but I have shown that strength is not just aggression. It is the ability to forgive, accept, and grow," he said quietly. This confession struck Ryan, forcing him to reevaluate not only his actions, but also the true essence of the martial spirit. This unexpected meeting became a turning point. In the following days, despite the remaining legal and public disputes, Ryan began to seek a way to reconcile with himself and with those who once seemed like enemies to him. He met with veterans, listened to their stories of losses and victories, and learned to accept traditions as part of a rich experience, not as shackles hindering personal growth. His heart, once filled with the fire of protest, gradually softened. He understood, true strength is the ability to adapt, change, and find points of contact even with those who seemed like irreconcilable enemies. Soon, Ryan made a decision that shocked even himself. He announced the creation of a new martial arts center, a place where traditional techniques and modern methods would be combined in harmonious unity. The center was named New Path, symbolizing the possibility of transitioning from old conflicts to new perspectives. Here, masters, veterans, and beginners could exchange experiences, finding a balance between discipline and freedom, between respect for the past and striving for the future. This decision, made in a moment of deep reflection, became for Ryan not only a chance for personal rebirth, but also an opportunity to change the outlook of an entire community. Ryan's new initiatives found a response in the hearts of many. The crowd, previously divided between fear and contempt, began to perceive his center as a symbol of new thinking. In interviews with local media, he talked about how true strength is not in demonstrative blows, but in the ability to see a person who has gone through their own battles behind every opponent. His words, filled with sincerity and deep understanding, became a bridge between two worlds, evoking respect even from those who had previously criticized his methods. Standing on the threshold of the New Path Center, looking at the sunset that enveloped the city in soft golden hues, Ryan saw in his eyes not only the memory of past battles, but also a spark of hope for the future. Each trial, each confrontation had led him to the understanding that change is not destruction, but an opportunity for growth. He knew that there would be many difficult days ahead, but now he had a goal: to help others find a balance between tradition and innovation, between the past and the future. And looking back at the path he had traveled, he quietly whispered, "This is only the beginning of a new path where true strength is born from wisdom and forgiveness."